So a Gimp user asked me how to make this album art in Gimp. So I'm going to go over how that's done. I'm going to kind of be doing this on the fly, so you're going to kind of see how I do this in general, how I would figure out how to do this, and everything along those lines. So the first thing I would personally do is I would right click on the image and click copy image and get it into Gimp like so. And to do that, I just hit file, create from clipboard, and it went ahead and created the new file from the clipboard. So now I have the image on a single layer, and this gives me the ability to zoom in and really look at it and really kind of pick apart how this thing was made. And just looking at it, I can see that this would be essentially made of 4 different elements and several layers. First off, you would have the background, and just looking at the background, ignoring the Roman what appears to be a Roman numeral 2, the text in the center, and the text at the top, just looking at the background alone, you can see that you're probably just going to have some kind of texture applied on top of a plain black background. And then on top of that, you would have these 2-letter I's to represent the Roman numeral 2. Again, I'm assuming. And I would probably, it looks like those are just semi-transparent. So I'd probably use an overlay layer mode or just normal with some opacity. And then on top of that, you'd have your text in the middle here and the text at the top. The text in the middle is pretty intricate. There's a lot going on there. Looking at it alone, it looks like there's a bit of a bevel, and then there is a pattern in the middle, and then the font itself is its own unique font. So we'll have to look into that and see what all we can do and how close we can get to that, knowing what we know at this point. Alright, so now that we have our background, I went ahead and hopped onto DeviantArt. I went into the stock image section and I found this image of stone. And I think this might be a pretty good option to use for our background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the download image icon at the bottom right side of DeviantArt. Right click on the image and click copy image. Close this, open up Gimp, and I'm just going to paste it in and right click and click to new layer. So we now have the image of the marble on top of our on top of the layer that we pasted earlier. So now I'm going to right click on the pasted layer and click new layer, click OK, click on the bucket fill tool and fill that layer with the color black, because we need the color black for the rest of the image. What we're basically going to do is we're going to take this marble and we're going to use it, we're probably going to use it as a layer mask to basically create this image, or create that background. And I'll show you what I mean as we go. So we'll go ahead and get rid of some of this extra junk at the top because we don't really want that. So just grab your marquee tool, your rectangle select tool, and just tweak it until you make the selection. Then click on the eraser tool, and we're just going to get rid of that completely. You could probably also hit the delete key. I think that works too. Yeah, you can just hit delete. And then click on the move tool, move this up, and get rid of that little chunk at the bottom. Again, using the rectangle tool, just tweak it, hit the delete key, we'll zoom out. Okay, so now we have just a chunk of marble. But as you can see, the marble image isn't bigger than our album art image. So we're probably going to have to do some duplicating or cloning or something to be able to make this work. And at this point, I'm actually going to move the marble to the middle. And you'll notice our layer boundary, which is this yellow line that goes around our marble, it's smaller than our image. And we want it to be the same exact size as our image so that we can actually paint and add stuff outside of our boundary. So what I did was I went ahead and moved the marble to the middle, and then I'm going to right click on that layer and I'm going to click, where is it? Layer to image size. And what that'll do is that will match the boundary to the existing image size. Now that we have that in place, we're going to go ahead and right click on our layer and click Add Layer Mask and set it to Grayscale Copy of Layer. Now I'm assuming that you already know about layer masks. If you don't, I recommend checking out my lesson on layer masks. I will link it below so that you can check it out later. So now what I'm going to do is we have our layer mask here and we also have our regular image here, but we want to get rid of the regular image and replace it with just the color white. So click on your layer, hit select all, click on your paint bucket tool, and make sure you're set to fill whole selection and fill the whole selection with the color white. So now what we have is a layer that's completely white like this, combined with our layer mask that is making certain parts of this image visible and not visible. Now let's take another look at the final image, and as you can see, we've got a long ways to go before we actually make this look like he has it, but we can get there. First we gotta just click colors. I think we need to hit invert, and I think that'll be a good step in the right direction. Well, maybe not. Actually, let's try doing this first. Let's click colors, levels, and let's see what happens whenever we start working on the color levels on this a little bit. There, now all of a sudden it's really starting to look like what they had in theirs. Just kind of mess with these settings until you find something you like and hit OK. And then from there, I'm going to actually click on my clone tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm using a hard brush, and I'm just going to clone chunks of this throughout the rest of the image, just to kind of let it duplicate, just trying to fill up the rest of the image with my layer mask to kind of create the illusion of that pattern. Okay, so now if you look, we're looking pretty close to what they had, although our pattern might be a little bit too hard in some areas. Like, let's get the clone tool back out, and this thing could probably go away. So let's go ahead and pick an area to clone and just kind of click some of this stuff away. And if you don't understand what I'm doing, I'm holding in the control key and I'm setting a point to more or less clone from, and then wherever I click it's going to create a duplicate of that. And I'm just going to kind of zap away some of these details that we don't really want. There we go, that looks a little better. And maybe if we reduce the opacity a little bit, maybe that'll help pull some of that back. So again, let's look at the original, and you know what, I'm actually going to move my original image to the top, so all I have to do is hide it for a comparison. See, that looks pretty close. I mean, the pattern itself is completely different, but it gives us the same general look. Next up, let's take a look at how we can make this Roman numeral. And to do that, we're just going to click on the text tool, and I'm going to click and drag like so that it creates a text box equal to the size of my canvas. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it makes it super easy to be able to center these Roman letters, Roman numerals. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the justify, and I'm going to set it to centered, and then I'm going to type the letter I 2 times, and I'm going to scale it up. There it goes. Yeah, I had to type in the I twice, and then I'm just going to scale it up. There we go. Really big. It's maybe 900 pixels. That looks pretty good. And then maybe I'll just grab this and drag it down until it's roughly in the center. And then we'll go through the list of fonts available until we find something that happens to look like the letter that we want. And actually, my Roman T font seems to do pretty good with that. See how it compares. It's pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the background layer for reference just to see how big this actually needs to get. Go ahead and move my text layer up so I can actually see it. And just keep scaling until they're roughly the same size. Move my text box over. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then just click out and space somewhere to end the operation. Switch over to a different tool, that is. Okay, so now, as you can see, we have, I'm going to hide that layer, move the text layer back down. So now we have our Roman numerals in place. All we have to do now is pull the opacity back on these, and they will give the same effect that these ones had. In fact, you might even be able to actually move these underneath and get an even better effect. Press overlay. No. See, I don't like how that looks. It didn't create the effect we wanted. Let's try some different modes here. Maybe burn. Dodge might be a good one. See, that's getting a little closer. And in fact, that actually might be a good solution. Combine the dodge layer mode to kind of brighten up some of those areas, and then duplicate the layer and set it to a layer mode normal and turn the opacity on that down. So now this layer is what makes all of the background brighter, and this layer is what actually gives the shape of the numbers. So as you can see, oftentimes it's usually just you're just kind of experimenting with different options and different combinations of things to be able to create what you want. In this case, I ended up creating a combination of the dodge tool and the layer mode normal to create that. To make the center font set up here, it's going to require that you find a font that's relatively similar to this. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head, but I can at least pick a font that will be presentable and come fairly close. And you know, this process will work with any font that you use. You just have to find the font that looks as close as this as possible. So what I'm going to do is, like, as you can see, I created a text box and went right around the size of the wording, and I'm just going to type in what it has there. And then I'm going to hide everything else. Yeah, okay. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to scroll up and down through the different font choices until I find something pretty good. Okay, so I found a pretty close font, and what I'm just from my files, if you need more fonts, you can always download more online and install them. And if you need more information about that, I recommend checking out the second lesson in my Gimp for Beginners series. And the problem with this font is, if you look at the spacing on this one, the spacing between this line here and this line here is nothing. I mean, they're touching. So we have to compensate for that on our font. To do that, there's a property inside of the dockable dialog where you can change the spacing between the two different fonts, and we're just going to adjust that until they're touching, and then we're going to change the size of the font until it breaks to the next line. Okay, we'll go with that for now, and actually I'm going to push it down just a hair because we're going to have quite a big border around this when we're done. Okay, so now that we have our font in place, we're going to right click on it and click duplicate layer, and then we're going to hide the one that we duplicated. We're only doing this because as we continue to edit this one, we're going to lose the ability to modify this text later. So we want to have a backup just in case something goes wrong. And then we're going to click Filters, Distorts, Emboss. This is where I would start. And what we're trying to create right now specifically is this black border around it. So we'll go ahead and just change the settings on this until we get a nice black border like what you see there. Let's see if we can tweak that to make it more severe. Doesn't quite look like we're going to have much luck doing it this way. So, okay, no problem. Hit cancel. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to right click on this, or double click on the text layer here. Actually, click on the one below it. And I'm going to select all the text, and I'm going to change its color to black. And deselect. And you'll notice we now have a black text layer and a white text layer. And I'm just going to click on my move tool, make sure I'm on move the active layer, and I'm just going to move this text up and behind it just a little bit, kind of like that. We're just trying to create that black border first, and we'll create the white border thereafter. Okay, something like that. Now we're going to click on our top layer and click Filters. Where is it? Decor, Add Bevel, and just set it to a kind of thicker setup. Uncheck the Work on Copy and hit OK. It'll go through and it's going to actually use a script to create a bevel to kind of give it the shape, to give it some shape to, put some shape on it. And now, if we start showing everything else, you can see that our image is starting to kind of take shape. But from there, we would have to add some flares and add a pattern to our text to make it look more like it. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and find a suitable pattern online. Or on second thought, it's actually probably going to be easier to just kind of take a chunk of the pattern directly from this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the background layer, going to click on my rectangle select tool, and I'm going to carefully select a chunk of this image so that we actually get it just right. So I'm just kind of tweaking it. My goal is to try to select down the halfway point of one of them and across in such a way so that whenever this is copied and it's patterned, it'll look like it's a clean pattern. So that looks pretty close. So I'm going to hit Control C to copy that. And just to be sure, I'm going to hit Edit Copy because I don't think it worked right the first time. Close that. Okay, here we go. So now if I go over to my embossed layer here, show my layers again, there we go. If I go back to my embossed layer and right click on it and click duplicate layer, I am now going to click on my paintbrush tool and go all the way up, and you'll see here there's a pattern on my clipboard, and I should be able to brush over top of that with that pattern, which we don't necessarily want to do it that way. But if we right click on this, we're going to add a layer mask and hit white full opacity and hit add, and from there we will just add the actual pattern in to kind of create the illusion that we want. But we're not going to just use the paintbrush tool like I just did, because that's not a good way to do it. So let's undo all that. We're going to hide the layer underneath so that we can clearly see what's going on here. and then hit select all, click on the bucket fill tool over here, and we will just fill this entire area in with a pattern, which is our clipboard earlier. And as you can see, just like that, we have now effectively created the pattern on our font. So if I show all of our layers again, for comparison, there's theirs, and then here is what we ended up with. Now as you can see, theirs is certainly more polished than ours. There's some shrink wrap effects and things like that, and we can add those too. In fact, that's actually why I added the emboss earlier. So now we have two of these layers. We have the pattern layer, we have our pattern layer here, and we also have the emboss layer. So I'm going to move the emboss layer above the pattern layer, and I'm going to right click on it and click add layer mask and set it to grayscale copy of layer and click add. And again, I'm just kind of experimenting with what I think would work. So, no promises. If it doesn't work right, we'll go back and we'll try something else. So now I hit select all, and then I click on the bucket fill tool, and I fill the whole selection in with the color white. So now I basically just have this white text with some opacity based on the emboss that I had originally created. So now I'm going to click colors, levels, and I'm going to really crank on these levels to try to make a lot of this image dark, except for the highlighted areas, just to kind of pull out certain specific parts of this image for the use of the shrink wrap effect. Colors, levels again. See if we can pull even more out. There we go. And then do it one more time. And I don't think we're going to get much more of the detail out than that. So now if you turn your pattern layer on and your black layer on underneath, you will have something that looks relatively close to what they had in the first place. Now, of course, if you look at it though, it looks like our white layer is a little stronger than theirs. So to fix that, we're just going to click on our white layer that we created here, and we're going to just pull the opacity down a little bit. See, I didn't like what that did, so maybe we'll click overlay instead. I don't know if I like that either. How about dodge? Dodge looks pretty good. I like what that did. Okay, so that's a general look at what I would do to create this font. The only other thing that they have going on that we don't really have going on is the highlights on the black text underneath. And to do that, you're basically going to do the same process that we did to make this highlight here. So let's go ahead and right click on our black text layer and click duplicate layer. And we're going to go ahead and click filters and repeat add bevel. It's going to go ahead and go through that script again, and it will create the bevel. Let's see if it actually created one that looked okay. See, the bevel actually didn't work for us that time. So what we're going to need to do is we're actually going to need to click colors invert to make this white and then repeat that process, because the bevel itself is actually, yeah, there we go. And then just click colors invert again, and you'll see that we get some highlights on the underside and things like that. So whenever you combine that with your text layer and essentially repeat the process that we repeated up here by right clicking on it, in fact you don't even have to invert it. We'll leave it at white like that. Just right click and click add layer mask, set it to grayscale copy of layer again, and click add. This time select all, fill it in with the color white again, and click on the layer mask and click colors, levels, and adjust the levels until you get rid of a lot of the white. There we go. Repeat that process. Oops, I must have clicked cancel. There we go. Do it again. One more time. See if that does anything else. Nope, looks like we got as much as we can. Then turn on the rest of our layers again. And as you can see, it kind of overdid the brightness, the white on that a little bit. So let's try setting it to dodge again to see what happens. Let's hide everything else and just have nothing but these two layers. It looks like dodge didn't help, so maybe overlay. And it looks like normal is probably going to be our only option here. So maybe we can pull some of the opacity back. See if that looks okay. It almost looks like it's too far offset. So let's go ahead and click the links on these two, on the text layer, the black layer, and the white layer that's associated with it. And then we're just going to kind of move both of them over until they're a little bit closer to the rest of the image, like so. And then unlink those and see what result we get. That's not too bad. But it actually kind of looks like the highlights are on the other side. So I almost think I should move the highlights elsewhere. Maybe if we click on our... So in truth, it looks like that's probably going to be about as good as you're going to be able to get it without relying on any kind of scripting or doing a lot of work on your own. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is look up a script called Layer Effects, and actually I'll hunt it down and I'll just include this link underneath. But what it will do is it can actually take font, and if you click Layer Effects, Bevel, and Emboss, it gives you a lot more options. So you can change the angle and all that stuff, and then whenever you're done, it'll create a really nice bevel for you. It's a lot easier than trying to build all this stuff manually. So I would recommend that you make use of that and just try some different settings until you get till you get the emboss like you want it to. And then once you have something that you like, just go ahead and add a couple of these little shiny spots, for better lack of terms, by right-clicking and click New Layer. Just set it to Transparency and click OK. Click on the Paintbrush tool. And then, try clicking on some different brushes to find something that you think would be a good shape for it. I kind of like this star to kind of give it that shiny look. And then just kind of scale it up. Click a few times just to really add that shine. Looks like they added one more on the F. There you go. And there you go. So the only thing left is to create the trap text up top. And to do that, all you have to do is right click. Actually, no, not even that. You just click on the text tool. And then again, we're just going to click and drag. Select in that area. And I'm just going to use the same text that I actually used for the text below. And once you have your text tool selected, let me do that again. Click and drag around your box. Click inside of the text box to start typing in it. Change your font size until it's reasonable. That's way too big. And it looks like you're going to have two different text sizes this time. And then just click inside of your text box. And type. Oh, I butchered that, didn't I? Just double click on your text layer to edit it. And then put your text in. And then we're going to change the spacing. I'm actually going to move this text layer up so I can see it with this one up at the same time. So yeah, go ahead and just change the font height until it matches roughly. And then from there, we're actually going to need to change the font spacing, which is available down here. Just increase that until it's about the same. And as you can see, the font that I'm using is going to be quite a bit smaller because it's not the same font. But if you had the same font, it would match perfectly. And now I'm having trouble seeing what I'm doing, so I'm going to hide that layer so that I can fully understand what's going on. And whenever I hit enter, it is actually moving down, so I need to make sure I set my justify to centered. And then sometimes the editor inside of Gimp is a little buggy, so I like to hit the checkbox here to use the editor, and it actually pulls up this old school version, and I actually kind of like to use it better because it seems to be more reliable. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my layer back on and then type in the rest of the text. There we go. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. The text seems to be messing up for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and type it up, this line on one text layer, and then I'm going to click on the text tool and click and drag and create a whole new text layer specifically for this second line. And then I will adjust the text until it all fits on a single line, make it smaller until it's about the same height, and continue to adjust it. There we go, that's really close. Click off, then hide the original, so that we can kind of see it before and after. And there's what I ended up with. Looking at the whole thing, it looks like my Roman numerals actually aren't visible enough. So I'm going to actually go back to my Roman numeral layer, which, if I can find it, that's the Dodge one. And let's go ahead. I think I must have deleted mine at some point in time and messing around with this. So I'll go ahead and recreate my normal layer, add some opacity to it, and move that one up to the top, and then do a before and after. And as you can see, the big difference between mine and theirs is the text. The text is very different looking at them back to back, but that's basically what they did to make it. So I hope that helped. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll see what I can do to help you more. Thank you.